Thanks today to everybody for coming today. Welcome to today's discussion led by Matt Cannell with Tom Frank and colleagues to look at the current state of the printer-publisher relationship and what makes for a good one and what could make for a more effective one. In preparing for this, some of the ideas have been kicked around in our supply chain committee for much of the last 2.5 years. Aided by Matt, but who started this conversation with us going back in 2021. But I think it's also an opportunity to revisit it, see what the current state is, and share your ideas and as well on what would make for an effective production relationship. So with that, Matt, why don't you kick it off, and then we'll take some conversation for 10 to 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to the crew moderated by Ken.
Yeah, sounds good. So, when Brian was asking me about this, the first two people I thought of were Tom Frank from VersaPress and Jeff Tolsma from Baker Book Publishing. And both of them, I feel like in their for working for the respective companies, have done a great job at working well together and in terms of the results that they've been able to achieve. And we've had some very, difficult times during the pandemic. And I think that, force us to sharpen our focus and, be innovative with some of our ideas. And I think Baker and VersaPress, came through that time period well, and still to this day are good partners. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff and Tom to give you some insights into what they feel like is a good way for printers and publishers to partner with one another.
Well, thank you so much for the amazing introduction. I am Jeff Tolsma from Baker Publishing Group, and I want to thank you all for stopping by today's Lunch and Learn. It's an honor for Tom and I to be able to spend some time with you today, kind of like we do in a regular situation. Our goal is to generate some food for thought, as well as interact with you on the subject of building a partnership philosophy when it comes to vendors and customers. So the first question we'd like to answer from each of our perspectives is what's gained by taking a partnership approach to the vendor-customer relationship. So Tom, I will let you go first. What do you think?
Well, thank you, Jeff. And, from my understanding, a partnership approach is a great way to work with a publisher. The energy and effort invested in this situation creates a dynamic that I think is far more productive and efficient for both parties involved.
There was more than I thought there would be. That's nice. I can help.
As a partner, I learn the needs of the publisher, in this case, Jeff, and use that gained knowledge to be able to provide him with the highest level of offerings I can, the best pricing, the most options, and ability to meet his schedule. If I've done my job right and well, I'm going to be aware of Jeff's specific needs. Therefore, I'll know with certainty that what I am offering him and Baker is what he wants and needs to be successful. So, Jeff, what's your insight on your perspective on partner relationship from a publisher standpoint?
Sure. As book publishers, obviously we'll emphasize three primary factors that influence our vendor decision-making, and their price, quality, and timing. And those things are extremely important. But another factor that we consider at Baker when choosing a vendor has to do with the relationship. Is the vendor coming to me to do business on price, timing, and quality alone? Now, those are kind of sterile points, and they're important, but we also look for and use vendors who are interested in a partnership. As I've worked to develop this philosophy at Baker, I've come up with a rough definition of a partnership, and this is very loose and probably different from some of you. So I'll be interested to hear what yours are later on. But for me, it's a vendor and a customer relationship wherein we share the same goals and where the vendor needs us as much as we need them. We're not a giant in the industry, but we need to at least feel like there's an opportunity for growth on both sides, and that revolves around trust. So developing a partnership like this does take time and effort, but in the long run, I believe that developing relationship with my vendors allows us as Baker Publishing Group the best opportunity to achieve the goals of best price, quality, and time. So Tom, what do you think about some of the things that you've done? I'd like to hear from your perspective to kind of help us out here.
You bet. I agree with that. And that trust, from my standpoint, it's something I have to earn on a daily basis. And it's not to be just taken for granted or I have a pass to do whatever. It's what have I done for you lately, or my publisher customer. And the way I can do that is you've created opportunities for me to earn my keep and my presence at Baker. And an example is in Baker, I worked with your design department. There was a bit of a divide between manufacturing and design, which I see in a lot of companies. It wasn't awful or anything, but there was not the connection that we all wanted to be the most successful. So you let me work with the design team, and I was able to meet with them, listen to their wants and needs, and then come up with something going forward. And what we did is we put together some sample books, or sample covers rather, that were labeled with specific features, with particular traits, and we are able to pass it through our departments. So when I say the departments, I'm referring to the production and design departments. So we're all looking at the same samples, using the same features, so we can use the same terminology in reference to each other. This isn't just for VersaPress too. This would be something they could use with the discussions with other printers, but it elevated everybody. And the other thing I added to these samples was not only the labeled feature, but an approximate cost each feature would have to the unit pricing. That way, when we're having our discussions, we have a good idea of what that feature will not only look like, but cost. And this opened up much more communication between all parties involved. And it made everything that, this direct communication, I think elevated everybody and made us feel more valuable and needed. And we had an impact. Yeah. So allowing to work with that design team, I think that design team felt they were being heard. And when they shared what they wanted and their needs, I was able to go over things with them, explain how their wants and the features they were designing in the book product would run on the equipment, and how their input and design would impact that. And in turn, we helped them set up files for that to get the best results. So that dialogue and that lane was opened up. So at times, and they still do this, they provide test files to us, and they'll send them over along with maybe a brief description of, hey, this is what we're trying to do on this cover. This is our desired outcome. Can you review this and get back to me? So I do. I take those. This is not my area of expertise, but I know the people who can impact that here. So I take it to our pre-press and production department to have them confirm everything will work. So the way that it's intended, and I know how it's intended because it's in that description. And I take their feedback and bring it back to both production and design. And if there's concerns, options are also provided to get their desired result. And we try to create a timetable to do this ahead of the order, so it doesn't become like a scramble. So ideally, we're doing this in advance of the work coming to plant. So then if there's feedback or change needed, the design team has enough time to make the changes and get their desired result without impacting anything negatively. And what this trust that we now hopefully have created and fostered, and it's not we, Jeff really fosters it. He's overseeing it. He creates that atmosphere, as do the other publishers who kind of work this way. And when this, being heard and feedback's provided, I think all these folks feel more connected to the process. And we add to this when, if there's a Zoom call or if I'm on site, we do the meetings in person with both sides, both teams involved, the production and design. And again, this elevates the atmosphere of trust and awareness. We're working as a single entity. The rapport that is fostered by Jeff in this case and at Baker is not just in this production department. You know, it's expanded in other areas. For instance, in the warehouse, their inventory folks and warehouse manager needed a way and reached out to us to convey specific shipment information that he wanted that would be taken from our data system and be put into some kind of a document and then emailed to Baker to be processed for orders. Well, this again is not my area of expertise, but I was able to take the goals that were outlined by Baker and the warehouse manager and work with our IT department. And he created a document and had even some input on it. And this document pulled the information from our system, put it in front of our customer service folks, and then they emailed it to the recipients desired at Baker to arrive in advance of the product and therefore be used in the receiving process. So again, kudos to our IT and customer service team and the Baker warehouse and IT teams to develop and work to implement this document. It is being used on each shipment that goes to them now. So that is, again, some ways that we have taken this and applied it within Baker. And now, you know, from my standpoint, Jeff, do you have any partnership benefits that you find in working with your printers or myself in this case to better things?
Absolutely. So within a partnership, an important benefit for us is the ability to utilize the expertise of people at our vendors. Versa, in this case, which you mentioned very well, to help solve issues. So I'm going to bring up the P word, the pandemic. Everybody say, ugh. Yeah. So the pandemic that is now over, when things were a challenge for all of us in terms of lead times, Tom and I worked out a shared document where information was entered on our end for a specific title and followed up with the information from Versa regarding important required dates for POs, files, all sorts of things. And if there was tests that needed to be done, we would include timing in that. And so that really helped us, and it allowed Versa to plan for the paper stock ahead of time and allowed Baker to lock in production delivery dates, which was huge at that time. And thankfully, Versa was able to hit those very well because their planning was done well. So while the desperation level has obviously been significantly reduced over the past year plus, the document is still in use today, just in a different format. Another example of a partnership with Versa is they helped supply us with some paper stock when we were looking to do a change in the type of paper. And Versa was able to supply helpful information that guided our decision-making process that helped shape the final decision. This included running several plain samples for us to share with our editorial and interior design teams, and then run it up the chain to the ELT to make sure that everybody was on the same page before we made this move. We couldn't have done this without Versa. So feather in their cap for this. And obviously, as Tom mentioned, our most recent collaboration is revolved around important data points that we needed for receiving. Not only was Versa willing to help us with this process, but as he noted, their IT department supplied valuable suggestions on how to improve the document used to convey the data for us. So when we embarked on this new process, Versa was the first vendor I came to with the proposal because I knew they would not only be willing to help, but also have the capacity to do so. And that's because of the partnership that we have formed and the relational transaction that we have. So Tom, how would we shift from a transactional type relationship to a partnership, in your opinion?
Well, that's a good question. Again, there has to be the willingness of both sides and an air of, an atmosphere of communication. As the sales rep, in this case, or the printer, I try to, as much as I can, initiate more ideas, questions that are regarding goals, ideas, and desired results. And when the publisher, like you in this case, comes back and says, yes, this is exactly what we're looking for, this, I realize the atmosphere is there and the situation is ideal for a partnership relationship. And there, I feel like I'm turned loose in a way of speaking to succeed, because I'm going to have information, feedback, and again, goals to be measured by and to justify my existence. And this isn't like on a spot basis or, fair weather. It's a continuous basis. And that can be on things that aren't so ideal. For instance, in life and in work, sometimes an important way to cement a relationship is by overcoming adversity, and with a publisher. And this can happen in a number of ways. But for instance, as a printer, what if we produce a book that has a quality issue? How I handle it in my company is critical. Is the issue given the needed responsiveness? Is it done without prodding by Jeff and his team and the publisher? If I make a mistake or cause a problem that could have been avoided, do I own it or do I try to dodge it? Do I try to come up with a way in my company to prevent it from happening again and set up situations or guidelines to not only fix it at that time, but going forward, and share that with Jeff and his team so they have more confidence going forward that this is less likely to occur. And other challenges that can present themselves in our partnership is the printer or the publisher facing issues and challenges. For instance, how do we come up, what if sales are slow? Does my energy and does my drive and my input and my efforts slow down? No, not at all. If anything, I can be part of a solution or a chance to work things out and improve chances for success. COVID was just mentioned. And I think regardless of our industry, but particularly in the publishing, COVID changed everything for everybody. And in our situation with Baker and Versa and myself and with all of us, our workflows all had to be reset. Now due to allocation, I'm referring to now being during the pandemic, we now had a finite amount of paper and things were so backed up, press time was at a premium. But the goals didn't change. So the goals were still to provide books and schedules that were reliable and, could be acceptable for Baker and Jeff to succeed, that his sales and marketing team could build their events around. And we did this through a number of communication devices, including Zoom. And I got to be honest, I didn't even know Zoom existed before COVID, and I'm recently only being able to use it. So I'm trying to get better. But these were things that we did to help improve our partnership, to grow. And again, adversity is one of those things and challenges that helped me earn, as Jeff said, feathers in my cap and justify my existence there. So Jeff, what, obviously from your publishing standpoint, what kind of things do you notice and, or need in terms of growing a partnership? When does it shift for you?
Yeah, well, actually, I was going to kind of focus on some of the things that were brought up about what happens when the wheels fall off, so to speak. And I saw Brian's question about publishers. Do publishers make mistakes? The answer is no, we never do. We're perfect all the time. And it's always up to you to figure out what the problem is. No, I'm joking.
No.
I always go back to that movie Elf, and I think of Walter Hobbs, and we have our Walter Hobbs moments. If you haven't seen the movie, go back and take a look at it and make sure you're signing off on your blues if you still have those. But customers have to realize that we're not perfect either. We need to be willing to share responsibility and, if necessary, make changes to our own processes, and we need to learn and grow together. So that's very important to me. No one likes to take a hit for a mistake. It's costly in terms of time and money. And this is where the rubber meets the road for us and where transparency is important. Somebody mentioned transparency earlier. It's not just in this case, it's in other cases as well. And we can talk more about other opportunities for being transparent, but printing isn't a perfect science. It still takes humans, and I think we're kind of fallible. We make mistakes to produce a book. And last I checked, nobody and no company is perfect. So I don't know about you, but for me, there have been times when a problem can lead to a high amount of stress. I think somebody even mentioned heads will roll. You get that feeling that, is it going to be my head? It can be difficult to not take those problems personally, but the key instead is to focus on the issue and its solution. I've had to realize in my younger days, as I've grown and matured in my work life, that taking out my frustrations on a salesperson does not help the situation. Focusing instead on the issue allows the sales rep to focus their energy on coordinating with their production team, and they can come up with the best solution. The conversation about frustration should probably be held from when a resolution is well in process, i.e. the 24 plus hour rule. Sometimes maybe you've heard that. If not, I can explain that later. So for us, there are three things that kind of revolve around the partnership and the development thereof. One of them is time. It takes time to build a relationship, and we have to make that time. I know it's hard. I know it's hard on both sides, but it's really important. Then transparency, that magic word that I think came up in the questions, a willingness of both sides to collaborate, not only and be honest so that they can solve problems and come up with new and better ways to work together so that everybody benefits. This should be mutually beneficial. And then an open dialogue, listening. Sometimes that's really hard for us to do, and just to take that time again and listen. Eventually, you begin to develop almost an intuitional relationship where expectations are clearly understood between Tom and I. And he knows who I am. He knows how I think. And the suggestions then can be made on either side that will help improve the quality, save money, or improve lead times. So, and I know I'm focusing here on our relationship, Tom and I. I do want to say we do have other vendors, and I work hard to do the same thing with them. So if any of them are listening, don't feel like you're left out. But Tom, you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, I agree. And I just, again, knowing you, I know you're fair and open with all the, not only the vendors you work with, the printers, but the designers and all people contributing to your product. And partnering is not easy. It's not one size fits all. And every publisher has unique and different needs depending on their market, their product offering, their size, and the people and individuals involved. But it can still be applied, whether it's a small place that does a few books a year to the big fellas. The goal that we have here and the format we're using is apply this approach to listen, learn, and use the concept in a way that makes the publisher successful and wanting to partner with me. I am named after my uncle, Tom Frank, who was also a print salesman. When I got out of college and went into print sales, I asked him, what does it take to be successful? And he said, the key is to listen. If you listen, he said, customers will tell you what they want and you will know how to make them happy. That is not what I expected to hear from him. I was a little disappointed at the time. I thought it'd be something sizzling and zippy, and it was not what I heard. But after time and experience and failure, I realized his wisdom. Now I live by it. So, Jeff, what can you tell me about the relationship aspect that we have as Tom and Jeff in this case, and how it affects our relationship?
First of all, I will say I can't believe that your uncle didn't tell you to stay away from print sales, but that's
I've overcome the bitterness.
I'm naturally wired to be engaged in and enjoy building personal relationships myself. So my goal is to get to know the person, not only for the business they represent, but for who they are, their family, their day-to-day life experiences, and believe it or not, those things play a role in how well we can function in a partnership. Having that ability to listen well and to be a little bit intuitive in what our needs are. It was what, last fall, Tom, that your daughter came out
Yes.
when you came to visit. Tom had a situation where he called me as he was getting ready to come out, and he said, well, I got a question for you. Do we need to reschedule, or can my daughter come with me? She needs a little dad time, and I'd love for her to see what I do. And my answer was absolutely, bring her out. So we had a lot of fun engaging with her, and she learned some things about publishing. And then we even had a little fun learning more about you from your daughter's perspective, which of course was all good, but you know, so you may be asking how that served us, but I think the deeper connection that we had been able to make with Tom, and that's me and the production team, as well as others, has benefited us in helping to see a different side of him, and it improved our communication for the better between our companies as a result. So that's kind of my wrap-up take. Tom, what's yours?
Well, thanks. And I appreciate that worked out well for you too. The importance for me in having a personal relationship with Jeff and my other publishing customers out there is self-serving. And that sounds negative, but there's no doubt it feeds me in a way. It's the way I'm wired. It is much more enjoyable for me to get to know and enjoy the people, and in this case, the person I'm working with. In Jeff's case, you know, he has so much to offer, and his personality gives me energy. And our industry and also my account base offers me a great range of personalities that I am better off for working with. Jeff and his team are absolutely fit right into that. There's no exception. I appreciate his values and their values, their knowledge, and their humor and company very much. And the more I keep learning from him, just reinforces that. And taking that relationship that we enjoy together and applying this that we've discussed so far, and keeping it as an ongoing framework for working together. I feel that even another pandemic, God forbid, or other challenges out there, or just the way to work to make each other better and successful, we have the plan and we have a guide to work by. And hopefully, out of what we've shared today, there's a few things that folks listening can pull from this. And I've learned a lot putting this together. So thank you.
Boy, it's been a great back and forth here. I'm curious. You talk a lot about communication between the two of you, but are there other key communication channels and practices that support a strong partnership?
Tom, what do you think on that?
Yes, that's a great question. So the challenge that we face that Jeff talked about, a shared worksheet and document, came as a result of a challenge what my customer service rep and myself felt we had to do the best job for them. His team plans ahead a great deal, and there's multiple people trying to schedule and time multiple books at a time. That was further out than what our system here really works within. So we created this worksheet, and both Matthew, who introduced us earlier, and Carrie, our customer service person, put together to put all that communication and information on a sheet so there weren't surprises. We see several months ahead this particular title, and with these particular specs and needs are coming down, and we're looking to have you produce it. So the quoting has already taken place, and possibly even any anticipated information is on there. And I use that daily as ways to reference to make sure something doesn't get by me. And if I see something and I think, wow, I haven't heard about that in a while, I can reach out to that person and ask more about it. And because it's a shared document, they're looking at it as well, the same thing I am. So that's my one example that I have of how we've adjusted in a certain situation.
Hey, Tom.
Communication.
Hey, Tom and Jeff, would you mind if I shared that spreadsheet?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I
As
just
long as
thought
there's no
Tom-
pricing on it.
I don't think,
think
no,
there
there's no
is.
price on it.
No,
No, but I'll just say, being readily available. Sometimes it's email, sometimes it's phone calls, sometimes it's Zoom. Those are kind of the key channels with which we work, but also my team knows that they have access to Tom and his team so that they can get answers to the questions that they have. So this is the monster that we all created together, but it has been very helpful because during the pandemic, especially, it was very hard to know when things were going to be on schedule, right?
Mhm.
If they're going to stay on schedule, if things are moving along. And so what it did was just kind of like column L, the final PO due
Yeah.
date. We knew when it was needed. We knew when the final files were due. Everything is right here in a nutshell. And then you can even color code it if you need to say, hey, this is in red or something, and there's a problem. I don't know. My team uses this an awful lot. I don't use it as much, so I don't know what those burgundy things mean. But
It's good, Jeff.
it's
a
good. Okay.
Yeah.
So
But this is a response to Jeff and his group. I saw a question that popped up that's a really good one. They work out ahead very far, but
Yeah.
we have other customers we've applied this to that work out. I'm going to call it on a more, I'm going to say typical lead time, maybe within a month ahead. And we still use it as a way to, customer that shares with me their goals. Like we want, to get a book ship on the first of this month. When do we need materials to you by? Can we reserve some press time? These are things other printers can offer their publishers as well. So this may not be unique, the concept, but this is just a tool we've used to keep things on the same page. And do I have, and when I receive those materials needed, I check that off and let them know either I have it or I need it still, and update them that is the schedule still as we're hoping. And so this is just one way.
How do you manage rush reprints in a carefully scheduled environment like that?
That doesn't work on that. So that is a different playbook. That's the third and long playbook. And on those, what we do is Jeff used the term being available. We listen what the need is. We have this book and it's going, we need it fast. And if it's busy and we don't have like readily available capacity, we look at things like trading. So I'll say, Jeff, you have another book that doesn't have quite the urgency. Can I take this rush reprint and put it in that slot with that press time and binding time and move this back a little bit? And therefore, we work out a way without disrupting other publisher and our customers. And that works almost 9 out of 10 times. And then if there's anything after that, then I get others involved and we try to work through some way to get books in their hands. But that's a really good question, Ken. And it doesn't quite apply in this case, but this is more the 80-20 part.
So what about the financial arrangements and contractual terms? I would have expected to have seen like scales pricing and pre-negotiated agreements and all of that versus book by book quoting.
yeah, we still operate on a book by book quoting process here at Baker by our own choice. And I think some of that has to do with our size, to be honest with you, compared to some of the other larger vendors who have the opportunity to, because of their economy of scale, say, okay, well, or they're involved in even in purchasing the paper. We don't do that. We're just not large enough to have a stake in that. So we do rely on our printers very heavily to do that. And but that being said, we do schedule a lot of our work ahead of time because we want to make sure that we do have schedule. First of all, that we're being a good partner with our vendors and we're giving them an opportunity to plan ahead as best they can. And secondly, to just make sure that we lock in our dates as best we can. So yeah, that came out of the pandemic. We still do it. Obviously we're not 6 months out like we were, but we're still a couple months out, and we know ahead of time, far enough ahead of time that we can make those decisions. So I don't know if that kind of speaks into our perspective.
Mike Shatzkin mentioned no trim size on the spreadsheet. I got to say, I didn't even see that when it got flashed up there.
Boy, we need to add something to the spreadsheet
I
here, Tom.
believe, yeah, maybe, yeah.
Well, I think a lot of
can't-
it has to do with like most of their product is on a 32-page signature system. And then the other thing is the quote number ties it to, you know, what project it is. But yeah, there's, text colors, paper type. But I think we're so used to working on 32-page signature system projects with Baker that maybe
Yeah.
trim just didn't make it on there.
They do have a variety of trim sizes and a pretty wide variety, at least from what we're used to. They have a large product offering in terms of type. They do things with Bible and Bible paper that we don't print and produce. And from, kids' books and hardcover, softcover, everything. But like Matthew said, that as far as trim size, which can be a major column, and this would be, a very easy thing to add. In this case, with that job number and that quote number, we can get to that information. But the information that we're more focused on, at least the people I work with at Baker in this case, and myself, is the timing. When do the quantities, the page count, and all that get finalized so we can reserve paper stock, reserve binding time, and give them what they really want, that, assured date. Now it's on us. If they do all their part and we've said, you do this, you get this date, now the ball's in our court and we have to live up to that. Even though things are quoted, things are very aggressive in pricing. And we work very hard to get each title that we can. And I think my peers at Baker, the other printers, would say the same thing.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, Ken, real quick, that I feel like this is like an additional item on top of what would normally for most publishers be, how we communicate and how we work each and every day.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really trying to say, okay, we've got so many, quite a few titles going back and forth between each other. So it's like, okay, can we have one area rather than going and looking back through countless emails to see, okay, when do I need to have files in for that? It's just what's the pertinent information that really needs to be centrally located for both teams to be able to access. Would be a good way of summarizing it.
I'm not even going to go back and mention my transparency question because you've answered it so cold with this the spreadsheet. I do have another one though. I was very impressed to hear about the level of expertise that you were able to inject into the conversations in design and in logistics and shipping. Is there opportunities to engage with editors? Is that relevant at Baker Books?
So I don't think, Tom, that you have had much interaction with our editors, but you certainly could. I think most of that information has already flowed to the people that need it. I guess, Ken, when we do work way ahead on what we would call special projects where there's additional special treatments or bling or whatever you want to call it, upselling on that book cover, where we will do that months and months in advance to try to determine what the best pricing is for the best outcome based on what Tom's team can do. And like somebody mentioned on there, well, not everybody has the same paper stock, and not everybody, you're absolutely right. And so those things have to be considered ahead of time. And so it is a little bit nuanced depending on who you're using and what their capabilities are.
Brian mentioned veteran production managers. Many publishers have been thinning down on their staff there. To what extent has production expertise shifted to the printers?
Are you asking me or
Yeah,
both of
I was
us,
just
or-
going to say,
I just want to throw that out there and see who would bite.
well, what I offer is I'm willing, I've always said to Jeff and others, I can be the other part of your desk. If you want to sweep something over and it's within a capability that, I mean, something that's appropriate and something that we can help with, that gives me a value to Jeff or his folks or another publisher that I work with. So if we, for instance, this chart that if this helps somebody else get organized and communicate better and makes their life easier, that's something. In the production standpoint, maybe if I understand you right, we want, if they send me a cover and say, what's a way we really want to feature this author's name and maybe this image that really pertains to the title, what suggestions do you have to economically give it pop? That's the word that's used a lot. And sometimes you look at the design, it might be, oh, gee, just doing this particular feature will really give that a lot of projection, and maybe only add a few cents per unit. Is that something you might be interested in? And so we do have those kind of exchanges together with, and if it's something that maybe they're not familiar with the process, I send supporting samples and pricing. And if it is, it's like the two minds are better than one comes into effect. Like, yeah, I can't believe I didn't think of that. And that happens on both sides all the time. So I think that's a great question, and it's something I encourage.
My answer to that, if I can jump in real quick, is it's a both and, in my opinion. I do expect that my team understands the printing and production process, and we'll get them out to these different places as needed. Things are changing in the print industry quite quickly. And so I want them to know kind of what's on the cutting edge. I have 22 years of production experience, albeit in packaging. So a lot of that, at least in terms of cover, translates really well in terms of an understanding of what is going on. And so I still think that's super important on our part. And it's not something that I can just outsource, because then I'm not doing him Tom a service. I'm doing him a disservice by saying, okay, this is on you, and me not being able to help manage that project.
That's good.
Very good. Now, let me just pitch in here. I've been kind of reading over to the side and asking questions like that, but I know that Mike is really good for tough questions. Javen, I think, has questions. There are probably some other folks around that would like to jump in here. So anybody that feels like they want to come off mute and ask a question, please feel free to do it.
Yeah, let's have a party. Let's go. Who says book producing is boring? It's fun.
Yeah.
I don't know who would have said that.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean,
I think that was your daughter, Jeff.
Oh, there we go. Everything's
Or mine.
No, mine probably yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does the partnership look like when, say, the publisher is getting pressured to be more responsive and be more like Amazon and ship in smaller quantities or be more responsive to their customers? Any thoughts on that?
Tom, are you seeing a lot of that?
I don't go much direct to Amazon, but as far as, some of the strengths that we have as a company, and maybe I hope I'm answering this right, Ken, is printing fewer books more often rather than large runs. After COVID, all the inventorying and usage histories were way off. They went from being low to crazy high, and then nobody wanted to run out and because of schedules. So then there was a long working through the situation where there's a lot of inventory, sales had changed. And when I hear people like Jeff say, yeah, right now we're trying to work through inventory, we've got, we're changing our order quantities are being reduced. So what do I hear? I hear, okay, so they're going to order less and they're trying to sell more. So I've got to figure out ways to maximize that unit price. It's going to naturally get a little higher, but what can we do to, as a partner, how can we give it a lot of zip and separate itself as far as features that we can offer, but yet keep that lower unit price, and then work with my manufacturing teams on ways to try to do quick turns to handle those quick reprints that you asked about earlier, Ken.
Are you also looking at like additional fulfillment services and kitting services and things like that?
Us? No.
Yes.
We do some kitting, but usually with third party, because it's not a consistent demand. We get it in spurts, and sometimes they're huge, and sometimes they're. But we have a handwork area that can do some small kitting, two volumes together, label wrap, or put in a slipcase. But then if it's something more involved and elaborate, we have to usually work with another group, and we have some partners that we can do that with and do some kitting. As far as fulfillment, we're not really set up for that. That's a pretty, I think there are some printers who do, but at Versa we don't.
Now, do you do anything to encourage publishers to gang printings of titles with similar trim sizes or paper stock?
Yes, particularly, and sometimes ink colors. So if they have a series that maybe I just have one that came from another publisher this week where they use a PMS text color. And that there's something involved with that from a manufacturing standpoint, to turn a black and white press off, wash it up, and put a unique PMS color. It takes time to make that transition. And this particular publisher had 4 or 5 titles lined up with that same feature in there. And it was great for us. And we made sure that we passed that benefit on to them with economies and cost reductions as a result. And so all those things you asked about are beneficial. And we do some ganging with binding size already, which is shared through efficiencies, and some of the ways we print covers, which are shared efficiencies that are baked into their pricing. But then when there's other features where, hey, this is something that we set up special, and if you bring these together with other things, there's some benefits to the publisher in terms of cost savings. And that's my job to make them aware of that, and then try to coordinate it so that it doesn't, it only impacts them positively in terms of cost and schedule.
Both of you have mentioned in different ways some of the trends that you're seeing. You talked about shorter printings and more frequent printings. Are there other future trends that you see in publishing and printing that would influence the nature of the partnership?
That's a good question.
It's hard to project that. I think some things that we see are, a lot of people have shifted back overseas to do some work, and now you're starting to see, oh, we got some issues out there, and the stuff is going to start migrating back. And so,
Right.
It's this ebb and flow that we see that I'm starting to develop that pattern thought process. And I think printers, it's probably very hard for you in terms of projections for that. But even in terms of the quality of the paper, I think we've talked about this at other lunch and learns. And I hate to put this out there, but I am a big fan of reducing the number of papers that are out there so that we can, all avail ourselves much more easily of certain things. And the paper mills don't have to keep flipping the switch to switch to this from this to that, when there are so many things that are so close. It's like, oh, yeah. And this is just my personal soapbox. So
yeah,
people are going to yell at me.
Your lips to God's ears, or to the editor's ears. Yeah.
I think on our end, nothing just jumps out, Ken, but starting with our customer service, in this case, Carrie, but I think the culture we try to generate here among my colleagues is when quote requests come in, to look at all the specs. And if there's something that a person sees like, wow, a slight trim size change or a slight feature adjustment here can really provide savings. And in our case, we've just did a new quote program here, which everybody's always in some stage of, whatever industry. Well, it made our offering various options easier for our estimators. So that, therefore, we really encourage here a culture of asking and challenging the specs as a way. Maybe there's a way to offer an option B that might save some money and work out well. And worst thing that happens, they say, no, thanks, we're set in stone. But, they know at least we're looking at it and we're not just being robotic and not trying to engage and offer our 2 cents. So that's the one thing that comes to mind, but otherwise there's nothing else that comes to mind.
This triggered a couple of questions about sustainable publishing in the chat. Are you talking about that, making plans to address sustainable publishing?
Are
You
you
talking to me? Which one are you talking to?
Whichever one bites, I'm telling you.
Well, and I guess, how do you define sustainable publishing? Because there's a lot of things that come to mind to me. Is it materials, or is it there's a
Yeah,
lot
that's
Lower, I would say lower, first off the cuff reaction is lower carbon footprint.
right.
Mhm.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways to do that, and I think for printers it's different because they have emissions from production equipment. We have emissions too, but it's computers and that sort of thing. Is yes, we are trying to discover the depth of our carbon footprint and what that looks like and how that shapes what we do. And then from there, in terms of our relationship, in terms of the partnership, we know that at least from what I've seen visiting Versa, they do a tremendous job of even collecting the dust. You know, if you
Just
want to
thinking
talk
that.
about just,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of thing. But, and then your carbon footprint, I know we had talked about some other things that I'm not going to reveal because that's not my business from you all in terms of that property next door. And so, I mean, we know from our perspective that we have a partner who's transparent about what they're doing to try to reduce their carbon footprint and sharing those things. But
Yeah.
again, not for me to.
Well, no, and that Ken, to add to that, what Jeff was touching on was what came to mind for me is we are an engineer owned or family owned business of engineers. So efficiencies not only make things more cost effective, they tend to reduce waste, and therefore energy and footprint are reduced. So they kind of work very well together. The dust collecting that Jeff's talking about was a problem for us. We used to have all this powder and just tons of this white dust get vacuum, sucked through an air hose into a large dumpster and was hauled away to, but because of the way it was sucked in and put in these huge bins, they didn't fill up perfectly. They were they layered kind of oddly. It's hard to explain, but it required more trucks to come in and haul these off, which was inexpensive and inefficient. So our group engineers here, and Matt was very involved with it, Matthew Cannell, they came up with this machine that we built. It's a 2-story device that takes this powder and makes these they look like a little koozie can of dust that's held together, and therefore they're dropped into a bin and they fill up very solidly. The trips away are reduced dramatically from the dollars and cents. It paid for itself in a very short time. But from a footprint standpoint, that's trucks, fuel, emissions that were reduced greatly. And we all benefit from it there. Every bit of paper, there's very little that goes to landfill out of VersaPress. It's sorted by value to the fiber people, as far as if it's, paper with ink, paper without, does it have some lamination and glue bits in? They're sorted, but they're all taken away. And even during COVID, one of the reasons that we found out pretty short time into it, we had a company come in here on a Saturday and our owner happened to be here, and they wanted to pick up our scrap to make the masks, and they needed that scrap and refuse to take off. And there was a sense of urgency at the time to use that material to make masks. And fortunately, he was here, was able to allow it to happen. That was it helped with the footprint because you're recycling, but it also had a large need that was filled. So yes, I think that we are interested in it. We are committed to it because A, it's the right thing to do, but B, it also makes good sense from a business standpoint. And I have to look at people like Jeff, and I work with some outdoor publishers that's huge to them. It's a big part of their mission. And what have you done for me lately, and how are you guys committed to that? And it's something we work on very hard here.
Well, before I wrap up here, I'm just going to comment on Chuck Harper's note about a VersaPaper dust puck that he's got on his desk.
Yeah.
I think that would be a great thing to hand out at the next BISG annual meeting.
Great
All
idea.
right.
A stack of them, like branded VersaPress on there.
As long as you
So,
don't throw it at each other, because you could get a
oh,
You
yeah,
can hurt
that's
somebody
a-
with
that's
those.
an issue there.
yeah,
This has been just an outstanding conversation. I really do appreciate both of your time.
dust pucks for all.
Matt, thank you so much for bringing these two experts and gentlemen to have us kind of interrogate them here. Really great lessons for everyone. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. We appreciate, Jeff and I were both kind of surprised and thrilled to have an opportunity to share, and hopefully it was useful with a few points for somebody out there.
You bet. You bet. Let's go
All right.
BISG. Love you guys. Thank you for
Pucks
what you
for
do.
everybody.
Pucks for
There we
all.
go. There we go. Brian, any last words?
No, thank you, Ken, for moderating.
My pleasure.